Hello, and welcome to Into the Night, the Five Nights at Freddy's podcast. I am your host, Nick, and thank you so much for listening. Before we dive in, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all of you to a project that has been in development for over 2 years. Proudly, it stands as the #1 Five Nights at Freddy's podcast on Spotify, Apple, and Audible. It's an achievement I could only dream of, and achieving this status has been an absolute delight. I am thrilled and blessed to have had the opportunity to delve deep into the lore of Freddy's for your entertainment. For those of you just turning in, our debut episode serves as an introduction to what this podcast is all about and what you can anticipate in the episodes you'll be experiencing down the road. I'll walk you through the topics we'll be exploring and the style of this podcast, as well as share my exciting plans for the future of this show. Plus, a glimpse into who I am and the reasons behind why I created this podcast. This is episode 1, an introduction. Could you please do me a favor? Could you close your eyes? You don't have to, if you wish, and if you are driving, I highly don't recommend it, but if you can, it will help. I have one simple question. When you hear the words Five Nights at Freddy's or FNaF, what's the very first image or thought that springs to mind? Remember, there are no right or wrong answers here. It's all about that initial spark in your imagination. If you've clicked on this podcast because you're well acquainted with Five Nights at Freddy's, chances are your mind conjured up a montage of spine-tingling jump scares, that nerve-wracking gameplay where you're rooted in one spot, unable to flee. You might have visualized the eerie horror exuded by the animatronic characters, their unsettling stares, and the disconcerting noises that seep from their mechanical forms. It could be the chilling moans and groans that make your skin crawl, or, equally unsettling, their larger-than-life yet strangely tangible personalities.
Thanks for letting me join the party. I'll try not to disappoint.
For those of you with just a passing knowledge of the franchise, does the memory transport you back to those vintage YouTube videos featuring gaming legends like Markiplier and Jacksepticeye? Those early days of 2014 where things were much simpler, when this internet sensation kicked off? A phenomenon that still captivates audiences a decade later? Recall the simplicity, and yet the sheer magnetism of its story, which ensnared gamers, keeping them enthralled for over a year with its mysterious plot and lore. Perhaps when the words Five Nights at Freddy's waft through the air, your thoughts meander to YouTube animations, fan art galore, and the vibrant online community that orbits this digital universe. Think of the cornucopia of game theory videos by MatPat attempting to decode the game's intricate lore, or Dawko's relentless struggle to finally conquering the dreaded 50-20 mode challenge in Ultimate Custom Night. And then there's the man behind the curtain, the maestro who set it all into motion, Scott Cawthon. He began as an anonymous indie game developer, a virtual unknown. And when he released FNaF, it was a final roll of the dice to keep his game development dream alive. Now, he stands tall as the visionary behind a multi-million-dollar franchise, commanding a dedicated development team with a Hollywood movie adaptation of his creation in the works. Now, as for me, when fleeting thoughts of the series drift through my mind, it's not just one aspect that surfaces. It's not merely the gameplay, the narrative, or the heart-pounding tension. It's the entirety of the experience, not just the lore, the world building, or the game design in isolation. It's the unique, unparalleled experience that encompasses the entire package. Five Nights at Freddy's emerged as an unexpected sensation when the initial game debuted on August 8, 2014. This petite horror gem cast players as a night security guard inside a knockoff Chuck E. Cheese restaurant after closing hours. Little did they know that the animatronic band, typically entertaining children by day, would spring to sinister life after dark, with their nocturnal mission to be capturing and terminating the player by stuffing them into one of their robot mascot costumes. The game garnered universal acclaim, but what many may not know is that its origins were rooted in one of Scott Cawthon's prior game ventures, one that had spiraled into a catastrophic disaster, triggering a maelstrom of mockery from gaming journalists and reviewers. Chipper & Sons Lumber Company, intended for a family-friendly audience, was met with vitriol and scorn from gaming journalists and reviewers. Scott was devastated by the backlash, teetering on the brink of abandoning his dream of becoming a game developer. He had cherished this dream for the longest time, but he had also a family to provide for, a wife and children who depended on him. Balancing the extensive time effort poured into these projects against meager returns was becoming increasingly untenable, especially when his gig behind the counter of a Dollar General was the primary breadwinner. Critics' scathing appraisals tormented his nights, particularly their damning verdict that his character designs were disturbing and uncanny, rekindling traumatic childhood memories of animatronic-themed eateries. Then, in a sudden, sinister moment of inspiration, a new idea ignited within Scott's mind. He jolted from his bed, brimming with a macabre notion. When asked by Power Up Gaming UK about what sparked the initial conception of Five Nights at Freddy's, Scott responded that at the moment he thought, quote, "You think my character designs are disturbing? Then I guess I'll show you something really disturbing," end quote. Without hesitation, he dove headlong into his new project. And 7 years later, Five Nights at Freddy's has not only maintained a sizable audience, but has consistently broadened its horizons in terms of size, complexity, and narrative depth. The love of the Five Nights at Freddy's series has always been multifaceted. On one hand, it's celebrated for its groundbreaking gameplay. Its unique setup and design defy traditional genre boundaries, creating an intricate and contradictory game experience that masterfully cultivates a sense of horror. Over the course of its evolution, the series has journeyed from confining players to a single room to enabling direct interaction with the environment through virtual reality. It's a franchise that fearlessly embraces innovation. Conversely, the series has also earned notoriety for its lore, the intricate tapestry of background stories, world-building events, and characters that set the stage for its terrifying scenarios. In its initial incarnation, the series unveiled its lore like an intricate puzzle, encouraging players to experiment and explore every nook and cranny for tiny, revealing details. Today, it boasts professional voice actors who breathe life into its characters, book series that dives deeper into its world beyond the confinements of the player character, and a more straightforward approach to its mysteries and story. However, it's the storytelling aspect that I aim to shed more light on with this podcast. As someone who has fallen in love with this series and stuck with it since my very first night at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, it's disheartening to see the fan community so fixated on the lore and technicalities. What often goes unappreciated is the narrative itself, how it's crafted, the symbolism within the characters, and the intricate web that connects the entire series. I understand that this franchise can be daunting for newcomers due to its complexity, but my goal here is to provide an engaging deep dive into the Five Nights at Freddy's story. I want to explore the overarching plots, analyze the characters, and delve into every aspect of the story in a way that is welcoming to those new to the series, as well as a fresh new experience for those who have been with the series even from the beginning. While many online personalities dissect the lore, gameplay, or design of the series, I have yet to encounter anyone who delves into the story in quite the same way. So what can you expect from this podcast, and what lies ahead if you decide to embark on this journey into the night? While the story and the storytelling techniques of the series creator Scott Cawthon will be the prominent topics, my intention is to dive deeper than most when it comes to the characters, narrative, and the world within the Five Nights at Freddy's universe. The initial episodes will serve as an introduction to the series' main storyline. We'll start with the era of the missing children's incident, covering Five Nights at Freddy's 1 through 3. From there, we'll move on to explore the Afton Family arc, spanning Five Nights at Freddy's 4 to Ultimate Custom Night. Additionally, we'll take detours into the book series with Fazbear Fright. Of course, we'll also analyze the story of the Steelwool era. And then there's even an entire audiobook production of Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach in the works. This podcast aims to be more than just an individual talking into a microphone with a bit of background music. Into the Night episodes will be a higher production quality, approaching the level of an audiobook in terms of ambient sounds and audio direction. Our goal is to immerse you in the world, allowing you to feel the palpable emotions in the air. You see, I've always been a fan of horror as a medium. Tension and dread are a fantastic element for engaging an audience, and I believe Five Nights at Freddy's has excelled in delivering these. If I hadn't thought this series was something truly special, I wouldn't have been a fan since the release of the first ever game. So, circling back to my initial point, as someone who sees this series as something exceptional, my aim is to share that appreciation and excitement with others. I'm incredibly thrilled to delve deeper into the story, but that's a topic for another episode. And that leaves us with just one question for you, dear listener. Will you join us into the night? I want to express my heartfelt gratitude to all of you who tuned in. I am genuinely thrilled about the exciting journey ahead for this podcast. In the next episode, we'll delve into the story of the first 2 games of the series, namely Five Nights at Freddy's 1 and 2. This initial narrative arc, known as the Missing Children's Incident, serves as the bedrock upon which the entire FNaF world and its stories are built. Once again, thank you so much for listening, and if you'd like to stay updated, please consider subscribing, following, or sharing this podcast. It truly helps us broaden our reach. Consider following us on our Twitter at Fazbear Podcast, joining our Discord, or checking out our merch store and Patreon using the various links in the description of this episode. Once again, I have been your host, Nick, and thank you again for listening. Have a good night, and drive home safe.